to another episode of the Aura Fury podcast. This time, your host is going to be myself, Jacob, and Alex Thompson. So a little bit of variety for all of you this time around. We've got a lot of amazing guests from around the video gaming industry, which is going to end up being the topic of this particular podcast. Why don't you all go ahead and introduce yourself? We'll start with Carlos.
Yeah, sure. Hey guy, everyone. I'm Carlos Puerta. I am a indie developer out of Houston, Texas. I run a small studio, Shadows Optional. We do everything from business contract game development for industries to a variety of our own demos that we've tried to get out there, but things happen. I have a long history of working both in industry game dev as well as low-level game dev with the community. Whole lot of stuff there.
Yeah,
Perfect.
me and Carlos actually used to work together. I worked with him on Shadows Optional and a lot of our previous indie projects. But me currently, right now, I work at Owlchemy Labs making VR games, which is something I love to do. Like just VR in general. I've been doing VR since 2016 in some form or another. And yeah, I just love working inside that medium, that space, as it gets turned into the XR, just general interactive, you know, another correct word, but it's the VR space. I love the VR space.
Okay, so I guess that means it's my turn. So my name is Christian Torres-Lopez. I've got a hyphenated last name, so no middle name. I am a data analyst at Gearbox Entertainment. So I don't work directly in game development, but what I do is I do a lot of analytics to support the development process and help the developers optimize their games. So a little bit of a different background, but hopefully it's an interesting one.
In the game space, I've heard a lot of cool data. Like people learn a lot of stuff from data in the game space. So I've never talked to anybody whose job is to sort of try to pull like useful information out of that heaps of data that I'm sure big studios like that will have.
Yeah, well, well, that's me.
Funnily enough, I'm also a data analyst, but in reinsurance instead of game.
Oh, really? So you do like, are you dealing with underwriting and stuff like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Glad to have you all aboard. Thank you so much for joining in. As you can see, guests, we've got very diverse backgrounds here, so very excited to hear from them. We're going to get right into the first question. Have you worked on any indie games, and can you tell us about any of those projects?
Yeah. Zale, I think I'm gonna go with the Worm project. That's my favorite one.
That makes sense. Yeah,
Um,
that was your favorite one at the time for sure.
oh yeah. So as an indie studio, I've had plenty of demos I've worked on, indie projects. Some I'll take to developers, publishers, I mean. Uh, as you guys might guess, they haven't come through. That the variety of reasons, stories. I'm gonna go with one of my favorite ones. So there's this Worm web serial book called Worm, a superhero story. Without going into too much details, it's kind of like a grim, darky world where heroes are a little ambiguous in morality and things. The big seller point here is the way that kind of powers and heroes appear in this world. All powers are kind of based off of that trauma Batman in the alley moment. So whatever the worst moment of your life up until that moment kind of kicks in, and without going into too much details, you'll essentially form a power based off of that. An example being a person caught in a house on fire, for example. You're caught in the attic, you're trapped, you're coughing, you're trying to find a way out. The power might manifest itself as a way of teleporting through smoke, right? You have the power to teleport and produce smoke anywhere around you, right? Versus someone who, same scenario, where except they have beams fall on them, right? Fire, burning, damage, physical, things, right? They may produce a power that is more Hulk-like, right? Resistance, strength, power of that nature, right? So what we did is we took this core concept of that powers may manifest in dozens and different ways, and we built a system that actually harkened a little bit to Gearbox and some of the fun Borderland things that can happen. Is we had a core power such as a simple bolt that you can fire at an enemy, and we created dozens and dozens of different traits that can be that can modify this power. Everything from your simple uh elemental changes, fire, water, ice. We even went with elemental concepts such as emotional things and how they could affect your stats. But more so things like, hey, your power changes depending throughout the fight. As the intensity of the fight changes, perhaps you now have a version of the bolt that bounces in between enemies, or you fire and it fires 3 bolts at the same time. And we built a very fun system. The demo is sitting up on itch.io. It's so the reason why this never went forward, the Worm IP, this is the name of the world, the Parahumans IP, by J.C. McCrae. He's a little particular about the owning of the IP, and he's had people come to him. I'll say big studios supposedly have come to him with like wanting to do projects and wanting to change things about the IP. And so for those reasons, it was very hard for us to move forward and kind of get that, like, hey, let's get that license with you so we can build something, because he liked what he was seeing as far as the things we were kind of putting together. But like I said, licensing IP things, and licensing IP is a big thing in the game dev world, for sure.
Sorry, you go for it.
Oh, I was just going to say, I was very excited as you were describing this game, and then very crestfallen to hear that it didn't end up going to a place where I could buy it.
I know it's my favorite project.
Oh man,
we had a huge response from the Worm community.
Mm-hmm.
They loved the base concept. We were real excited about taking it forward.
As a tie on to Worm in general, though, just that world, it's so understandable why it's hard to translate that to a mass audience, because some of the stuff that happens in Worm is some of the darkest things I've ever read, period.
Mm-hmm.
Like worse than war documentaries, where like the guy is so creative in the way he creates tragedy and horrific moments that it could never be, it really is something that could never be a mass audience appeal. So it has to find that niche. And I feel like he's waiting for the people that are willing to take that story fully and embrace how dark it is. And I think anybody who's trying to reach a mass audience is already having a hard time like trying to meet that goal. And it's always just going to butt heads to some extent. But the story itself is one of the best stories I've ever read. It's such a good series. And I mean, it's all one big book or 2 big books, but it could be broken up into like a 10-book series is how long this storyline goes on.
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure.
I can also piggyback on another game me and Carlos worked on, which I was my personal favorite at the time. Was, it had a couple different names, Patron, or we also called it To the Last Note. It was a play on like the battle royale system in VR, but instead of having weapons, you had magic spells you used based on around jazz instruments, and the whole game had music very much infused into the gameplay and the storyline. I think there's a lot of really fun stuff we had there because all of your spells were very gesture and fluid. Like it was very fluid interactions and very fluid gameplay. And when we had some troubles technically at the time, because it was a very challenging like endeavor to get the multiplayer and the gestures and having this battle royale. As we were working on our first major multiplayer game in the first place, we had like done some asynchronous stuff in the past, but lots of challenges to overcome, and we pushed through. We got those all the way to the place we were looking for publishers for it, and as so often as the story, no response. We needed that extra step to be able to take it from this proof of concept we really loved to an actual like game project. And as so many times that happens, it just sort of, if there's no one there to catch it after that next step, you can't keep pushing on it like that, because you can't keep making a better and better proof of concept. At a certain point, it either is going to become a game or it's just going to be a fun demo you made once, because it's a sad reality of being a game developer. Sometimes it does take money, time, and people to really make a game. A passion project can be a passion project. And if a person is really passionate about making a game happen with the right limitations, that game can definitely be real. But when the game is ambitious as we were trying to do, the space we were trying to break into with it,
yeah, not everything can be a Dwarf Fortress.
Yeah, or an Undertale, or any of those games that seem like they got magically created by one person that throws off the bell curve for everybody else.
Oh yeah.
So
I love the idea of weaponizing saxophones and trombones.
Oh, it was so much fun.
In high school, so that's sick.
Yeah, we had
you're not just throwing the trombone at people, I'm guessing.
No, you would like the trombone, the instruments were essentially like your ultimates or something, right? You would pick up a saxophone and you'd play like a couple tunes, and fireballs come out of the end of it like an artillery shell, right? And you're firing
My
these
personal favorite.
notes flying across the battlefield.
And we wanted a little bit of actually playing the instrument. Like you can put your mouth to it and it'd be like a little emote of like what like lick would come out, like what little sort of kind of like whatever the fun you could very lots of different like little musical like accents you could put at the end there. My personal favorite idea for that game was the trombone bazooka, where you pull the trombone forward and you bring it back to fire. And we even built like a demo of that once, and it was just so much. It was so hard to aim because it was right in your face, but we just made it up for that by making the explosion humongous. And yeah, that game had so many fun ways to go down. There were so many. It was one of those things where you're so excited to be able to put the time into figuring out all these extra little things that would go into it. And yeah, that one really breaks my heart sometimes. I love I have that project open every once in a while, just look at the stuff going on there because it was fun to play. And I think that was the fun thing when you're making a game. At a certain point, you kind of going like, is this even fun to play anymore? When you're making stuff, and that game always felt super fun to play to me. I mean, it's sad with multiplayer because you have to have somebody to play with, but when the conditions were right, it was always just such a fun experience. Ugh.
Was it just brass instruments? Did you have any woodwind instruments in there? Well, you had
Uh,
saxes.
yeah, we were doing mostly solid state stuff, nothing or stuff
So,
that
yeah.
didn't require like strings. We were trying to avoid.
Okay,
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Because mechanically in VR, it was easier to deal with a couple buttons on an instrument versus like a violin or a cello. A lot of hand motions that came along with it. So simple enough in theory, at least in the demo stages, of bring something up to your mouth, click a button or two, and either A, it fires or does the nice little emote song.
But it is one of those things we were really excited to explore if it was possible, because something like a violin could work, something like a flute could have worked. The infinite fun of percussion that could have been there. Like imagine you had like a whole drum set around you. You could conjure up the sort of things and different combinations of that. Maybe that could be like one of those like a Fortnite, like find a lightsaber in the middle of the field type of things where you're like, oh, well, I can just do a bass drum and have these all extra fun. Like there's so many interesting fun bits that come from there because music is such a widespread place to play around, and it always just feels satisfying. I remember seeing this talk once from a GDC. I think it was from GDC. Some developers talking about how if you keep all the notes within a certain scale, you will have no problems making letting that person do whatever they want, and it would still sound good. Where you're like, hey, I'm not going to let you actually play this instrument, but if I give you these note options, you can't mess up. It'll always sound like you're doing something cool. And giving people that power just sounds like a lot of fun. Especially, you shoot somebody, they're dying, you see them like falling into the ground, like going to the underworld, and you're just going do 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 on the top because you can do whatever you want. You could play the music yourself theoretically, and you would have had whatever copyright problems you wanted. It's like, they're playing the instrument, we can't stop them.
Dude, yeah. Conceptually, I think that sounds really cool. You could have, maybe the good guys are all in major chords and the bad guys can only play in minor chords. And maybe there's I like the idea of a sousaphone or a tuba being like the ultimate weapon that you can unlock somewhere.
Also, the world design we thought was cool because instead of having a storm coming in, it was lava or like a death field coming up from the ground, and so everybody had to work their way up a mountain to get to survive as long as possible. And I think that twist on like the getting towards a random location, towards the climbing up the mountain, always felt really fun because at the end you would be you and somebody else up at the top of a plateau. We had like a little like amphitheater, like concert stage up there. And so the idea would be you were like one person's on the stage, one person's in the crowd fighting back and forth. And we had the idea of we had this big character that would looking over the map the whole time. And then at the end there, they'd be like sitting there watching you as you were fighting with this last 2 or 3 people. Yeah. That game had so much fun stuff I was excited to mess around with. It's sad sometimes when you lose that opportunity to keep following through on something.
So when you have a proof of concept and a demo made, where do you take it at that point?
So the first step, in my opinion, is usually take it to your local game dev community, so that or a community that might test it right for you. Sometimes there are online communities. I know on Reddit there is a straight up play my game community where people will share their projects and share them. But the most important part of what I'm getting at is getting feedback, at least on that initial concept and demo, because as far as like some general problems, you don't want to catch like a strange bug that you as a developer didn't click on this corner, because you as a developer know that corner is probably not okay. So that's one of those things. The next thing would be putting together pitch documents and make sure you have a Zale, I'm blanking on the term. GDD, game design document. There we go.
Yeah.
Making sure that's the most important thing to kind of before going to a publisher. Hell, before you've even gotten to like most halfway through that demo concept, you got to have at least the skeleton of what your GDD is, your game design document that kind of dictates what the key concepts of your game are, what the kind of fun factors you believe they are, because fun is a almost non-measurable concept. That's the biggest thing in my opinion. Get those kind of documents together. Then once you kind of have that together, you get that pitch, go to a publisher. And what that looks like is one of a couple things. It's either you go to GDC, the Game Dev conference in San Fran, and chase around publishers for 3 days. Oh yeah, I've seen it. I've been there. I've been at GDC, and you'll see the indie devs literally running around with like a little copy of their game, right? Like on their laptop. They'll be like, "Oh, Mr. Publisher, please try my game, please." Right? And
I had people ask me who I was at GDC, and as soon as I said I wasn't a publisher, they just walked away from me. They were not interested in talking to anybody that wasn't a publisher. That's what they paid a lot of money to be there for, the opportunity to be in front of the right person. Like, you're not the right person, bye, I'm gone.
Oh yeah. No, straight up. Yeah, they'll be running around with their demo, and they'll have their elevator pitch. The elevator pitch is incredibly important, especially if you're doing the chase publishers around, because you don't want to annoy them longer than a minute. So you got to have
seconds usually.
Yeah, you got to have the elevator pitch going. So that's GDC, right? That's method 1. Chase dudes around for 3 days and maybe get lucky. Method 2 and 3 are almost the same thing. Find emails for publishers and or have a buddy that is real good at email scrumming, which is what a buddy of mine has done, who found the email list for the heads of publishing at various studios. For example, we reached out to the heads of publishing of Devolver Digital. I know for example, we found the head of publishing there, reached out to them, as well as other publishers. And that's method 2. And method 3 is hope that you got a friend that knows a guy.
Method 3 has the highest pass-through rate, in my opinion, honestly.
And honestly, method 3 does have one of the highest pass-through rates.
Getting in the right room, it's like something I've noticed a lot about even just the entertainment industry in general is it's all about what room you're in, and you could have everything right, and if you're just in the wrong room, it won't matter. Sometimes you just got it's all opportunity based in a lot of ways, and you can reach out. When you're reaching out to people in option 2, right? We're just trying to find people that are publishers and theoretically are looking for games to publish. You're having to fight through a lot of noise. A lot of people that maybe are trying to publish their first game like us, but don't have as much experience, or people who are trying to publish, something that's just a concept. There's a lot of times where these publishers are getting a huge amount of influx of people trying to get their attention. It's hard to tell which of these are like professional game developers, which of the people, at least the dedicated ones that are trying to really get a game get made, versus the people that are trying to like, oh, this looks fun, or that could be a fun thing to do. There's so many people trying to break into this space that there's like huge amount of noise you have to get through just to get the attention you need to even make your case in the first place. It's a lot of luck and a lot of hard work sometimes. It's like finding the right people to message. Like we would go to LinkedIn, find for the publisher we want, and then find every person in the department for like recruiting, or not recruiting, their
publishing.
Yeah, their publishing department, and basically find everybody that was important and send them something, even just so somebody, I'm like, oh, did you get that email about these people? Because even if that's just how it gets caught up, at least it's acknowledged that it's there. Sometimes you really have to just get your name spoken by somebody to be heard at all. It's kind of sad, but it's also, it is what it is kind of thing.
I guess that leads us right into kind of the next question. What are some challenges of working on indie games, and what are some benefits?
I mean, so the benefits are the idea that you're theoretically working on what you want to work on, theoretically, right? Because eventually you do get to a part of the game dev process where you don't want to work on this bit, but in theory, I like the game. That's where I'm working on my game. So that's the major benefit, right? That I am at a point where I have the freedom to build and design what I would like to build and design within some limits, right? As for negatives, there are lots of negatives.
The negatives drastically outweigh the positives.
Yeah. So obviously, the negatives are going to be as a small team where I operate somewhere, depending on what clients I'm working with, I may have anywhere between myself and like 3 other people that I'm working with. So my resources are usually spread thin in terms of what I can build and what I can try and do. Um, it also means that I am incredibly limited in funds. As far as I got to make sure that I twice as much make sure that if I'm asking somebody to model something or draw something for me, I got to really make sure that I'm sure about what they're going to produce. Because I don't have publisher money, right? So there's a lot of little things there where as much as you got freedom, you gotta carry all the hats. You got to be producer, developer, programmer, head artist. You got to do all the things at the same time. It's
I
all.
actually, I would say that's part of the benefits in some extent. I mean,
Oh, for
definitely
sure.
not completely, right?
It
But
depends how you look at it.
I would have never gotten into doing any audio producing if I hadn't had to mix my own sounds at some point where I'm like, well, I'm not going to find somebody to pay to do this. It's much easier to spend 8 hours digging around YouTube just to get what needs to get done. And once you have that foot in the door, then you have a little bit of knowledge about a lot of different things. And even if you aren't fully doing them, at least you have a more informed place to talk about it with somebody who does, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, that's definitely a benefit I would say has come out of like my time as an indie because I've worked so much in making sure that things that are produced for me or by me are gonna work, that I know a decent chunk about each vertical of the game dev industry, whether it's the art pipeline, 3D production, or if it's the art or audio pipelines. I know how to talk with those people and how to, make sure that those things are produced in such a way that I'm gonna be able to use them.
I'll add to that real quick. So I'm not directly in game development, but I've worked with indies, and yeah, I love the fact that because it's their potentially first title, they're super passionate about their one doing. Like you can just feel the energy when you work with them about how excited they are, how enthusiastic they are, and it is really nice being able to you basically contact and that is touching almost every area of the game, which is really handy. On the other side, sometimes they send me emails at 1 in the morning because they're, they got to do everything, So that's kind of that's a it.
Oh yeah, that's definitely the thing, right? There's no HR department telling me, hey Carlos, you need to get off at 5, bro. We were gonna get in trouble if you don't stop working at 5. And
I
I'll be
remember
sitting there at like 11, 12 at night.
They're putting me to shame because they're sending me emails. I'm asleep.
I
Exactly,
remember
man.
there was this one play test me and Carlos were doing for even another game we did back even further in the past. We called it, I don't even got to a further name than Troy. It was we had a demo with some people to show off, and we're like, oh, okay. We need when is it? Tomorrow? We're almost done. It can't take much more than what, 3 or 4 hours to get this ready to go. Cut to 12 hours later, we were having to work in shifts because we had to pull a complete all-nighter. Like we didn't stop working on that demo until we packed up to leave. And then I edited the video in the car on the drive over. So it sounds sounds tiring, but there's a certain amount of like manic fun to it that also is kind of part of the appeal. And to my extent, it's just like that was horrible. That was an excruciating experience, and I can't wait to do it again, kind of thing. It's a weird thing your brain does to you.
You've conquered the mountain.
It's
So moving on to the next question, what are some resources someone looking to get into developing their own game should look into?
Man, I mean, so this is almost stating the obvious, but I started with YouTube. Um, Depending on what aspect of game development you want to work in, is the big question to start, right? Whether you want to be a programmer, a artist, and even as an artist and programmers, there are subsets to those skills. For example, it is drastically different being a concept artist than being a 3D modeler or being an animator. But those are all technically the art department, right? But each one of those is a drastically different skill set. So it's kind of the first step is choosing what it is you want to kind of focus on doing. And then the second answer is usually find it on YouTube and there are plenty of free tools to learn the basics. For 3D modeling, Blender's out there. Blender's an incredible 3D modeling and animation tool. You can do everything from modeling, like I said, texturing, rigging, Though you can do the whole vertical, almost the whole art vertical within Blender, and export to Unity or Unreal. Uh, uh, yeah, I know Photoshop as the Adobe Photoshop, and I don't remember what the other one is. The standards for like concept art, but
Honestly,
GIMP
I
is a free option.
it might for just in general. I think a lot of people when they're starting out with game devs feel like they should spend some money to feel like it's to get the good stuff, right? You feel like, well, if I'm going to be doing this, I need to spend a little bit of money, or I should go for the better version, right? They wanted to get. There is nothing you need as a starter that costs money to get into game development. There are so many free resources and free education stuff on YouTube and other platforms, even besides YouTube, just people's websites. I've gotten some of the best information I've ever gotten just on someone's blog before, like especially on like shaders and some of the more like deep cut like topics. But yeah, don't feel like there's any need to spend money to learn because there's so many free resources, multiples of everything you need. Like from like Carlos said, Adobe Photoshop. There's 3 or 4 different options that are maybe not as good as Photoshop, but you're not a professional. You don't need all those crazy good tools just yet. You can do it with just the free stuff. Like I know Ableton, is that the free one? That's
No, Ableton's not the free one.
um
I blank on it.
Audition. One of those
Audition,
two.
yeah, I think Audition's the
Ableton,
free
one of those two is free. And so yeah, there's always a free version. And maybe it's a little wonkier, maybe it's a little harder to use. But again, the internet has there's always people posting stuff about how to use it. There's always people talking about how to use it, and there's always a free option. I think that's a really big thing for game dev. There is no reason to start spending money learning because people have been spending over a decade and a half, if not 2 decades, putting out free resources for making game development. And some of them are getting a little old, but the lessons are still very valuable, even if some of the details have changed. I think that's been something sad I've noticed recently is a lot of the information has started aging out as these platforms change and grow, but the lessons learned there are still very valuable. And even the lesson, even if the things have changed or the names of what's being used has changed, those tools or whatever thing they're teaching about exists in the new platform. And so if you want to learn about it and you don't understand what it's called in these new platforms, literally just go old name, title, new name, right? And that'll give you someone will have posted something about how to do that thing after things change. I mean, there's just it's millions of people like wanting to do this stuff across the world and creating this huge net of like information and help and support. I think as this like there's lots of communities that are worth joining. I think people kind of work in their own silo a lot too, and definitely getting it out there and talking to people and
Oh, for
getting
sure.
feedback is so important, especially when you're first starting out. That's how I don't think I would have gotten as far as I did if I didn't have a community of people that I felt I was excited to show my work to every month. I got to go show these people or post something to show these people how I've changed, how I've learned. And there's people who knew stuff that would answer questions I had and newer. And then you'll find that there's people who are even newer than you are who will now ask you questions. And that's just the whole cycle as you move through the field and as you get better and better. There's always people who are newer than you and always people who are better than you. And it's very reassuring to be in that fold of like knowledge because there's just you're working your way through passing along what you get and you get knowledge for free from going forward. It's a very open community of people that are there's very little if at all like people trying to hoard knowledge unless they're in the really big companies that have like legal departments and stuff trying to hoard knowledge. But the people in the game dev industry are so open. I'm sad Twitter is going down like a sinking ship because there was so much good stuff on Twitter.
Oh yeah. So yeah, no, for sure. Joining a game dev community is definitely one of the best ways to kind of get started. You'll find, like you said, find veterans, you'll find newbies. They'll push you to, it's gonna be people who want to build games, even if they're not like professional in the industries. It's gonna be people who even do it as a hobby. Just that kind of being around other devs definitely gives motivation to keep building. And kind of jumping back to a previous question about one of the worst things about being an indie dev is motivation. Is kind of keeping that drive going, regardless of whether or not you think your project's going to get 6 months from now get picked up or not. Make sure you at the very least finish something, make sure it looks good, and it can be real killer to the burnout in our industry is real.
Because so many people are so passionate that they think that I'll just throw my everything into this, that'll make it great. And that's the one thing that ends up making that game not happen because they'll get to the point where they've got it kind of working and then they'll get super exhausted because what's next isn't exciting. Once you're making a game is increasingly less exciting as the game gets made because at first you're just making stuff happen. Oh, I made my character teleport. Oh, the guns are shooting now. Things get really exciting. It's much less exciting to go, well, the bullet animation is actually 2 millimeters too far to the left, and we don't know why. And so we have to spend 2 weeks figuring out why the animation is playing in the wrong, like stuff like that. It's like, this isn't why I'm making this game, but it's definitely something necessary to make it something, a whole come together. It's it's a great thing I heard someone say recently that
It's the last 10% of the game that'll take 90% of your time.
yeah, for sure.
I use the 80-20 rule, but
That
yeah.
there you go. There it is. That's the number. That's the number people use, right?
Yeah, and that's everything in life, really. It's like you get like all the fun, you feel like you're making tons of progress, and you feel like that's 80% of the work done, and you're like, wow, I've done all these things. But then that last 20% actually is the bit that takes 80% of the time, and it's all just the little tweaking and fiddling and getting it all into the right bits. But it takes such a long time, and it's a lot less rewarding.
Right. It's
But
the
you have to do
polish. It's the polish at the top.
That percentage breakdown reminds me, it makes me think of speed running, right? You shave off the first hour within like 2 months of practice, but then it takes you like a year of practice for the next 30 seconds or whatever.
Oh yeah, I've heard.
Yeah,
I've heard speedrunners are crazy.
It's
Yeah.
crazy how fast they know how much have they messed up too. By the way, like you'll be watching somebody and they like sneeze and go up, it's done, or they'll like you'll hear their button click twice and like, nope, we're done. I messed it up. We're gonna restart over. 6 hours out down the drain. I made
Dude,
one
yeah,
wrong
it's
button
freaky.
click.
It's freaky. I like the emphasis you're putting on connecting with other people, because yeah, that's the thing. I mean, you've talked about all of the non-game development things that go into game development, and like all that
Right.
stuff happens through other people, so the earlier that you can start plugging in with other people, the better, I think.
Right? Because yeah, not every game's going to be your dwarf fortress that is made by two brothers over 15 years, right? You need more people. You need friends, you need coworkers, you need support.
Definitely. Yeah.
That's a good life lesson too.
That's
Yeah.
fair. That's fair.
Yeah. It applies across all walks of life. So now we've heard about the indie side. What about the AAA side?
Here's where I hand it off to everyone else.
Funny enough, if we're a slight tangent before we get into that, the definition between indie and AAA is so very strange, in my opinion, because there can be indie studios of like 200 people working together in like 3 separate continents, with $1 million budgets, and then like maybe I don't know the number. I think it boils down to
But your
budgets,
Larian
yeah.
studio can, I think, technically be considered an independent studio.
Owlchemy
Right.
Labs, people I work for, is an indie studio, even though we have a bunch of people and a parent company, even, right?
Wait, does Lariat count as an indie studio?
And that's, I guess that's part of the point he's making, right? What makes an indie studio? Is it a budget number? Is it the fact that you've sold X number of games already before?
Do you just identify as an indie studio? Is that
right?
Right.
Basically,
to me, it's a corporate culture distinction.
Right.
That's how I view it in my mind. I don't know what I think officially the definition comes down to like a budgetary one, but
yeah,
in my mind, indie is more of a startup feel and AAA is more of like a big corporation feel for like
for
just
sure.
a work culture.
Yeah,
it's just a vibe check.
Oh, so that's actually, well, Alex, when you put it like that, that's another business concept that we've basically rebranded for the gaming industry, right? Where instead of calling it a small business versus a corporate environment, we're calling it an indie versus a AAA environment, Okay.
And that's for sure. Yeah, that's actually a really solid, like almost mental note you can kind of look at. How much of a corporate overhead does this studio have, on the projects? And I think that's more than anything is going to determine what's kind of feels indie versus not indie. How much is the shareholder / financial team looking at your game and like, all right, how can we, get more out of it?
So that also kind of makes me think, okay, so maybe slicing the distinction another way, right? Maybe the difference is that indie is more driven from the bottom up, let's say, whereas maybe AAA might be more driven from the top down.
I like that. Yeah, no, for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
Dang. All right. We better copyright that before.
Right.
Very AAA mentality.
Yeah. Exactly.
Cut to you would know the game better. The Nemesis system thing is one of those things.
Shadow of War.
Yeah. there was this. You want to talk about it, Carlos? You know more about it than I do, probably.
Sure, I can dive into it. So, for those of you played Shadow of War, its big selling point is the Nemesis system in the concept of I may have defeated this orc captain, I might have killed him or whatever, and the game is going to produce a scenario where he is now survives, is mauled by whatever way I killed him. If I threw him into a fire, he now appears all burnt up, wearing a mask, and now it's this system where there's now like these generated villains for you throughout the story of the game that is kind of like this generative like generative story in the sense of like, hey, every player's gonna have a different experience. I'm not gonna run into Machik, the burn scar or whatever the game may call this orc, right? But the thing is, so the thing about it, why we're talking about copyright is that I may be wrong about the studio name. Is it Warner Brothers?
The people that own the Lord of the Rings licensing for video games, basically.
Yeah, well, the point being is the studio copyrighted the Nemesis system. And the reason why you haven't seen this in any other game is they have the way they wrote their copyright has pretty much blocked out any other developer from doing something similar for the next, I think,
20
years at least.
It's 20.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
And they've been sitting on it for 6 years. They have not made a game using that system. They haven't like even remastered one of the older games that use it. Like they copyrighted it so that nobody else can use it, and then proceeded to not use it. And that's sort of one of those things that's kind of sad. It's like the game industry thrives off of shared ideas and shared like growth and like education, like the battle royale field. Imagine if PUBG had tried to copyright the concept of a battle royale, right? Imagine the entire industry that wouldn't have existed because of that. It's when you're making games, it's very much a sort of like, I'm learning off of them, so I'm not going to try to stop my learnings from going down to the rest of the industry. And it's very obvious when that happens, or it's very painful when that happens, when people do try to stop that growth, because it feels like a roadblock that doesn't need to be there for the entire like concept of what a game can be and should be.
Yeah, it's one of those bits that you get more from AAA because they've got the more corporate view, and the corporate view is we copyright all of our IP to protect it. But if you're from the indie dev, you're thinking more like a programmer, and from a programmer perspective, you copy everything and nothing is copyrighted. Nothing is sacred.
Yeah, it's the Stack Exchange mentality.
Yeah,
right.
Stack Overflow.
Like,
sorry.
All of coding is you copy other people's work, you fiddle with it till it does the thing you want it to do, and that's your code.
straight up. Code is all we built on the mountains of those below us. We're building on top of mountain hills, right? No, and I'm honestly, I'd have to look into the exact like wording of this copyright, because I find it shocking that they were able to, because copywriting code is such a weird, specific thing. I know the Vegas industry, gambling industry has a much different set on that, but that's a different deal. But yeah, it'd be interesting to look at.
I think it's something about the way that they couldn't copyright the code behind the Nemesis system. They could only copyright the user feel, or like the user experience of it. Yeah, it's very, because copywriting, people have tried to copyright game concepts before, and it almost never works. You have to be very specific. It has to be very like this very particular thing, because the government's usually or the whoever handles, I think it's either copyright or it's a patent. I can't remember who specifically does for game stuff. But most of the time you're not eligible to do it. It's too broad, it's too ubiquitous, it's too simple of like a step up from somebody else's idea to be able to call it your own. But they just got lucky, or they had some really good lawyers, whatever it was, and it stuck. I mean, even people just ignore them sometimes. I think they should have been like pursuing that copyright in terms of like cease and desist and stuff, and that's the reason we haven't seen it, because people can try to copyright stuff, but people will still make them. And it's up to them to sort of enforce their copyright, and they're putting more effort into enforcing it than they are using it, it seems.
That's tragic. This totally changes how I feel about Shadow Mordor, man.
Right?
Yeah. No, I had all those fun memories about Kumail Nanjiani on Clueless Gamer getting roasted for his crappy voice acting, but yeah, this kind of puts a rein on that parade.
I know, it's unfortunate.
Yeah.
And he killed. I thought he killed it. I thought he killed it in it. By the way, he was hilarious as this orc. That whatever. It was
no, he was. No, he was super hilarious. I enjoyed it. But yeah, the kind of like that's that's kind of like a take your toys home and don't let anybody else play with them kind of thing. And that's kind of
Yeah.
What was the question again?
So
I
the
know,
original question was what's it like working for a AAA developer?
Oh, okay.
And talking about any large game projects. So technically, we're in the large game project field, but getting an idea of what the AAA side of things looks like versus the indie side.
That could be cultural differences as well.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'm not allowed to talk about projects that we are working on right now. But I'll say that, I mean, one of the things I like about working at Gearbox is that since it's a big company, it has a lot more resources than a smaller studio would have. So I have a lot of flexibility in basically like whatever technological resources I need to do my job more effectively, I have access to. We have a lot of internal resources and a lot of internal documentation about how previous titles have been set up and previous issues that we've run into. We have a really well developed system of troubleshooting issues, right? So if we have a launch and something goes wrong, we have a kind of a standard process that we can go through and evaluate what went wrong and implement fixes for the future. So I guess maybe there are more resources to produce better work. There's also more institutional knowledge to help avoid pitfalls or mistakes that have been made in the future, which I think is really beneficial. And I feel like in our instance, so I specifically work in the Gearbox publishing arm of the Gearbox Entertainment Company, and I feel like because we're attached, we've grown out of a developer, we have a lot more perspective of what things are like from the developer side that maybe a traditional publisher wouldn't. And then I would say the last thing too is that because it's a big organization, you talked about getting to know people within the community and the industry. Well, because it's a bigger company, like those people are there. They're my coworkers and my colleagues, and I just meet them naturally and instinctively over the course of my day. So I don't know. Overall, my experience has been pretty good.
I want to piggyback off of that a little bit because I thought that's really I can't talk about any of our current projects at Owlchemy, right? But the amount of people you meet on a day, like you meet or get to interact with on a daily basis, it makes the industry feel much more present in your life in a lot of ways, which is really nice. Because like I know when you're, especially me and Carlos were indies in Houston, and especially at that time, there was very few. There was like maybe 12 or 20 people total in the whole city who were interested in doing game stuff and who were actually pursuing it in some form or another. And there's bigger ponds out there, but it's sort of like getting to know people and actually meeting other people who have similar stories and have dedicated their time to getting into the game industry and have become like professionals and actually work there. It's an opportunity to meet other people like that. And especially on a team as large as the ones I get to work on, I've never worked with that many game developers at a certain time, or worked together and with that many people. And that was an opportunity I think I would have never gotten staying in the indie field unless I'd gotten into one of the bigger studios, which Owlchemy obviously, I mean, it's hard to talk about because Owlchemy is an indie studio. It's by definition an indie studio, and it has a large amount of people on it, but those people aren't always like working on the same thing you are. They have different understandings of the project than you do because you're focusing on different parts of it. It's just a very interesting atmosphere that I don't think I would have ever gotten the opportunity to work with if I hadn't had a chance to move on to that AAA. Triple I is the word people some use for these big indie studios, for these bigger companies that are working in the game industry, which give you a lot of insight into the pipeline because they had to go any game studio, unless it branched off from like an actual entertainment company, has had to have a pipeline and a timeline from being 2 or 3 people in a garage somewhere to being a real company with shareholders or whatever it might be. Like there's always a story there that's really interesting because every gaming studio has its problems and had its troubles, and almost all of them almost went out of business for a little while, and they all have such interesting stories to talk to. So getting to meet people who are part of that world, it feels like you're getting like a look behind the scenes, but behind a lot of these studios because they put forth such a front sometimes, and once you poke a hole through to the people who behind it, there's so many interesting stories and close calls with total bankruptcy, or just almost games that were almost a total flop, except they changed this thing at the end, right? All these people you're meeting will tell a plethora of stories from across their lifetime. And it's just always really interesting to meet people there.
Dude, yeah, I totally agree, man. Totally agree, man. Like I feel like everything looks perfect from far away, and I remember growing up and playing whatever it was that I played, Dragon Age or Rogue Squadron, or whatever it was that I was into, right? And what I just see as a consumer is I just see this polished end result that runs and is a fun experience and is super cool. But there's a lot of stuff. There's a big infrastructure, and there are a lot of people that made that possible. And as a consumer, you don't really get like you're saying, Zale, you don't really get a perspective into that. But when you're behind the curtain, as it were, you get to see all of the little pain points that happen as you go through the process, and you get to see all of the different you get to see how, like, you got to negotiate with the first parties, and you have to solve all these technical problems for cross-platform, and you have to get approval for a certain game feature. And there's all this, there's just a lot that goes on that you don't get to see when you're not in it.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know. By the way, while you were talking, I went to Owlchemy Gaming's website, and it told me that I couldn't go in because I wasn't under 18, so I had to change my age.
I think that's the wrong place.
Oh,
yeah,
is it the wrong place? Oops.
Yeah, it would be
this one-
Owlchemy Labs.
Yeah, it's spelled owl and then like alchemy and then owl mixed together.
Oh.
They do VR stuff. They made a job simulator, so you can that might be easier to find. Yeah.
Oh,
Working
my bad.
That is also an interesting part of working at Owlchemy, is they have a game that is truly like iconic in the VR space, if not games in general. Like Job Simulator is a huge game. And it's just, I don't know, it's interesting to see the history there as well. It's
Did you say Job Simulator?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Is it simulating just a white collar sitting at a desk?
Yeah.
That is part of it. Yeah.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. It seems like it would be super boring, but it's been one of the most popular VR games since VR was not a tech demo.
This reminds me of the whole like all those memes about truck driving simulator or whatever, where you spend all day driving your semi, and then when you get off, you just boot up truck driving simulator. It's like this is the white collar office version of it. That's hilarious.
I think it's like game developers like how do I describe it? Like, you're not making your life isn't this way, but you're so scared it could have been. It's like morbidly horrifying that you made this game. Because I don't know, I wasn't around during that time, so I wouldn't know. This is just more me enjoying Job Simulator when it came out as a person. I remember like as a game developer, I was very much like working in friends' houses or in my own timeline, or just very not a corporate structure to make games. And so as game developers, making that corporate tech job, corporate infrastructure, is like we were here or we're terrified of being here, and so we're making this instead, kind of thing.
It's like Office Space the game.
There's other
like
stuff
that.
too. Yeah, there's also like line cook and car
There's
mechanic
cashier.
and then like convenience store cashier.
Well, yeah, you're not kidding. This thing's got
just random jobs, and the idea is you load up a job and you get some instructions to like, hey, copy some stuff. Some dude comes in, you sell some stuff, and that's really about it.
It's got a bunch of awards too. I'm looking at the webpage right now. Dang. Yeah.
Oh yeah. It was one of the first VR games to come out that like really showed the amount of interaction and things you could do in VR.
They've been the thought leaders of VR in general since then. Like there's a sort of like unspoken like rule in VR that whatever Owlchemy's doing is the right thing to be doing, because their focus is so intent on making sure the games are accessible to everybody, and that there's no friction in terms of actually enjoying the game. VR as an industry has a lot of friction in the games themselves, not necessarily about the gameplay, but sort of because people don't understand the difference between VR and regular games a lot. I have a saying I've been trying to coin for years where it's like, you can't scale up a Lego set and call it a playground, because the way you're designed to interact with something is fundamentally different. Walking through a space versus looking down into it, or at least controlling an avatar within it, are very different things. I think a lot of game developers and people in general don't really intrinsically understand very well until you've tried VR. And Job Simulator was one of those games that really illustrated the difference for people in a very in a very understandable way, because it's the idea of VR is supposed to be making a space you can be in that can fully fund your entire creativity. Whatever you're trying to do in that space, you should be able to do. And that was what I understand. What I understand was the design philosophy behind Job Simulator. Like I remember they were doing a talk during like a GDC talk once where they said like we'd have people ask us why they couldn't do something in the game, and then we'd add it to the game, because anything somebody thought should be possible in the game, because they're trying to meet people's creativity where they are, and however that goes. Like I remember there's a great example where they have a copy machine, and you have there's like a vending machine where you can only get one thing out of a time. And so someone might think, oh, what if I put the money in the copy machine, right? This person thinks they've discovered a bug or a workaround in the game, right? And they go to copy it, and then out comes like a blackened piece of money going like, haha, and this isn't like we basically saying to the player, we know what you were thinking and we anticipated it. And the feeling of the game meeting you where your creativity is so viscerally fun. I think that's part of the magic of Job Simulator and the Owlchemy Labs games in general, and hopefully the larger VR space, like games like I Know You're Gonna Die, I think, or
I Expect You to Die.
I Expect You to Die. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that game is another really good one that has that sort of like open space to try whatever you want, and it tries to anticipate whatever you're going to try to do and give you a response for it. And those are things that work really well in VR, in my opinion. I personally am a very narrative focused gamer as like a person, and so I definitely there's a huge combat side of VR that hasn't really had that sort of like design philosophy put behind it. There's two very different schools of thought between like people like Blade and Sorcery, which is as physically accurate as possible, making it feel like you're a badass, just doing whatever you want and like swinging a sword and throwing a guy off a cliff, versus like gunplay or sort of like a separated version of combat where you're combating with a tool of some kind, and the physics aren't there, but the interactions with the weapon are what are fun. And so it's very similar to somewhat in terms of traditional gaming's like combat systems, but it's very different because you can't say, oh, and kung fu and press X to punch this dude. You have to actually punch the dude, and there's problems there where you might punch someone in front of you, not even thinking about the fact of like this person doesn't know how to throw a punch, so they're not good at it. And you can't tell somebody, oh, this game is hard because you're bad at actual martial arts,
unless you're Dark Souls.
Hold up. I downloaded a VR kung fu game recently that tells you you're bad.
You can. I'm pretty sure there's something I love VR developers sometimes where they're like, no, my job is to make this accurate, and it's your job to grow as a person to be able to play my game.
Well, seems like the new breakthrough could be, sucking simulator, where the whole purpose of the game is that you're just bad at it, and it tells you that you're bad at it all the time. And basically, like every time you learn a system, it changes the system on you, so you don't actually get better at it.
Oh God, it kind of sounds like Thrill the Fight, or whichever one is not cartoony, the boxing game.
It doesn't matter which one it was.
One of them. I tried hopping in, and Carlos does know like martial arts. Like, oh, this game is fun. I was like, oh, cool. I hopped in, and I was immediately just getting punched in the face by a 6'3" dude. And I was like, how is this fun? And it's like, well, block. And I'm like, how do I block? And it's like, well, that's on you.
That's the game. That's the game that you market to parents that are scared that their kids are going to start playing video games. You're like, give them this video game. They'll never play another video game again.
Or they'll become professional boxers. Because I've noticed kids are really good at VR, and they're really good at learning things from VR too. It's really interesting to see that stuff. I mean, some of the games they're playing like Gorilla Tag, where the only thing they're learning is how to swing their arms as fast as possible. But other games, they are learning a lot of fun stuff. It's interesting to see. Like Job Simulator has some cool stuff to learn about, because the inside of the car is not accurate, but they do learn how to open a car, right, and work on the inside of a car theoretically. And that's the first time anyone's exposed them to that in a way that they wouldn't break a car, because you can't. There's no consequences in VR. Worst case scenario, you just reload the scene, right? You just reload the game, and it's back to normal. It's a place where you can try reality with no repercussions, because it's fake. But as a person, when you're in there, it feels real. And that's the crux of the whole like piece of technology. It's like, sure, it's not real, but your brain is easy enough to trick that we can convince you it is, especially when you have you see your hands, you can walk around and the character walks around with you. Your brain, there's this really cool study from when they first started VR where they found out your brain will trust your eyes over every other sense combined in terms of what to believe. They put this person in front of a box, like a regular square box, right? And they said, hey, feel this box. But in VR, they saw a curved box. So the box was regular, but had a curved top. But in reality, completely flat. Most of the people, I can't remember the actual number, but like almost everybody who did that experiment swore that the box was curved. Even though they felt the flat box, they could feel it, they could feel the texture on their fingers, they could probably smack it with their knuckle and hear that it wasn't like curved. But a lot of them would swear that the box was curved. And it's crazy to think that how much your brain will trust your eyes over any other information it's getting.
I mean, isn't that our dominant sense anyway? Don't we get most of our information from sight to begin with?
But you would assume, or you would hope, I'd say that if your brain can feel or otherwise know that information is wrong, it would question that piece of information, but it doesn't. It'll always trust your eyes. There's also a really cool thing about like when your brain trusts the information it fills in from itself more than it trusts the actual source information. Like there's a blind spot in your eye where you see stuff, and if you have like a pattern repeating on both sides, and then you have the pattern filled in on the blind spot for one side. I can't remember exactly how the experiment worked, but the basic concept was your brain would trust the information it guessed at more than the source information it was basing it off of. It's crazy to think your brain trusts its own complete random guesswork more than what it's sensing.
Hey,
Yeah.
your brain, you know, if your brain doesn't believe in itself, who's gonna believe in it for it?
There we go. There we go.
I never thought of it that way.
Exactly. Yeah.
We came
It's
back
just
around
the-
to motivational.
Yeah. The brain just read a lot of self-esteem books when it was a kid.
Mhm.
So a lot of our listeners may not be like super familiar with how the intricacies of like the game industry and stuff has go. So that's kind of why this next question's there. What is the difference between a game developer and a publisher?
I think I'm gonna leave that to Christian, considering that Gearbox is a little bit of both.
Yeah. Gearbox is a little bit of both. Well, I suppose the short answer would be that a developer, you know, takes a concept or an idea for a game and actually does the work necessary to produce that game. So, you know, doing the sound design, designing the art assets, the gameplay mechanics, what the plot is, that kind of thing. The publisher's role is to bring that game to market, because there's a big chasm between having you know, an exe or a bunch of DLL files or whatever it is that you have on your computer that constitute a working game, but then actually having that game available on Steam for someone in Thailand to click buy and download, right? And so that's what the publisher helps with. The publisher helps bridge that gap. And there are a lot of different things that go into it. So there are things you have to consider about, you know, brand and marketing. For example, I don't know, there's 7 billion people on Earth. I don't know, let's say there are a few 100 million people that have the money to buy video games, the desire to buy video games. They're not all going to buy your video game. So which of those people are going to be interested in your video game? So that's something that you as a developer may not have the resources to figure out. A publisher may be able to help you understand that better because they have experience with other titles that have gone to market. They can also help you liaise with the first parties, right? People like Sony and Microsoft who have standards for what your games have to meet in terms of quality, in terms of stability, in terms of backend services communicating with Xbox Live and PSN. So basically, the developer builds the game, and then the publisher helps with all the little admin stuff that isn't as fun, that gets the game to actually be sellable in the marketplace.
For sure, right? And to add to that would be the money. Publisher's often going to be I'm gonna say maybe about 70-80% of the cases the publisher is going to be the money for the game dev.
Yeah.
How
Especially
that
when
gets
it's
split is a different ordeal, but yeah.
especially for first time developers, because like a lot of times a company that makes a game doesn't have the money, and maybe that's, let's say even theoretically they had their own, they got published for their first game. A lot of game developers will make some amount of money from that game, maybe enough to make a little bit more of that game. But unless your game is a huge success, like number one on Steam for a few days or a few weeks at a time, you usually can't fund your entire next game with that game. And so it's always a sort of back and forth between like, okay, now we have enough money to work. How are we getting this published? And also, people don't realize how much money goes into the marketing of your game. Like, I think there's some, I think, I don't know where I read this, so it may not be that accurate, but something like a third of the budget of all the budget of a game goes just towards marketing and getting people to hear about your game. Because you can have the greatest game ever made, and if you just drop it on Steam without telling anybody, it's no more, it makes no more of a splash than, you know, whatever random anime project somebody posted on Steam this week. You know, it's
Yeah.
All the dirty games on the
The
Steam,
other,
right? You
yeah,
might-
the Doki Doki Literature Club 37 just dropped. Yeah.
or like School Adventure 43. Oops, what happened here? Like, that maybe shouldn't be on the store. But you're right next to it, unless you have somebody to pay Steam to get, or maybe I don't know how that I now that's the thing where
There's a
me
lot
and
of
Carlos-
factors tie into it, but in short, it is going to be one part like, hey, making sure you get like pre-sales, previews, wish lists, you know,
like
making
YouTubers and
trailers,
content creators, yeah,
right?
getting people to play your game.
Right?
Yeah,
All
that-
those things.
Yeah, that's something else that Gearbox Publishing does, is help set up things like Twitch streams and get builds out to YouTubers and press people so people can review your games and give it some attention. Also,
Right,
I was
'cause-
gonna say, I cut you off. Go ahead.
No, go for it, Christian.
I was gonna say, you made a good point about the financing, right? So like if you're developing a game and you kind of have the choice whether you want to go with a publisher or self-publish, and so the trade-off is that, I feel like one of the trade-offs is that if you want to go it solo and self-publish, let's say, you have you're gonna reap all the reward of it, but you also bear all the risk, right? Whereas if you have a publishing partner, the rewards are split, but so are the risks. You don't have to take it all on the chin if it doesn't go great.
Oh yeah, for sure. And Chris, something I was going to bounce off is Christian mentioned something really important, is that publishers, provide resources. Because publishers, typically speaking, would have some experience in development, whether or not they come as a development studio themselves or not. They would have worked with ideally other studios, and the big thing being, hey, I need help developing this feature in my game. I'm 3 weeks stuck on it. I can talk to my publishers and be like, hey guys, you know anybody who can help me out? And they are invested in my game succeeding, right? So they will help me recruit or find someone to bring this in, right? The other factor is marketing, and like Christian said, Twitch and all these other deals. If it's not the publisher doing it, it's Carlos by himself, and in the room for 7 days straight, working on these things. And maybe the 3 other dudes he got to working with him, so yeah, publishers are a huge thing,
especially with I've heard about a lot of like working with once you get to like maybe wanting to get a game onto PlayStation or Xbox, right? All of a sudden, something that worked really well on your PC and you were excited to, this is a great PC game. Oh, it could be on Xbox. That's crazy. My game will be on Xbox. And then it's so much effort to make it work on there. And you oftentimes they'll need someone who's specialized in it to integrate it, unless you want to spend an enormous amount of time and energy learning how to do it just so you can get your game onto there. And so I've heard a lot of times where publishers will, hey, here's our PlayStation guy that we work with sometimes. He can come into your game. Oh, you use Unity. Cool. He knows how to help make Unity games. And they'll have experience with very specifics of like, oh, the people who make games in Unity will usually do things this way. And I know that if someone did something this way, I know the way on Xbox, the audio system doesn't work right. They can catch those gotchas for you. Like that's one of the biggest parts about someone's like experience in the game dev world is not even basic like raw skills. It's the experience to know when things aren't the way they should be or the way people say they are, or just knowing like, oh, that's going to be a problem, and like anticipating like stuff from just experience, right? It's all comes down to experience. You can have the most theoretical knowledge about how to make games, that half of the work is just knowing stuff from doing it before. That's why game jams and stuff are so much fun, because you get to really experience the whole process very quickly and learn about stuff and learn about things you may not usually get to in your game that takes 2 years to complete. Oh, well, we'll get to the audio eventually. We'll get to the audio eventually. Like, so many games undervalue audio is it's a good example. And having somebody that knows how, or somebody that knows the tricks and ways to make sure that you don't fall into the issue of your audio sounds bad. The gameplay is great, but your audio isn't mixed well, or the spatializing isn't good, or all these different, or you're not using this industry standard tool that everybody should be using, but isn't come standard. Like, I've seen people release games on Unity without using Text Mesh Pro, which is insane to do because it's free. It makes every text in the whole game look better. And sure, it's not the standard, but it definitely should be. But if you don't know about it, you wouldn't know to always use it instead, kind of thing. It's one of those things where it's only experience, only knowledge about the industry, or just the willingness to experiment. And some people don't feel like they have time to experiment. They feel like, I have this vision, I have to work here. Who cares how the UI looks? Who cares all this stuff? And those are usually the things that make a game go from being, oh, it's a fun demo, to a really polished experience that has a good customer or a good player experience. Because your game can be so much fun, but if the menu is annoying to use, who cares how fun your game is? You couldn't get in. The person never pressed. The person never got to the point of actual gameplay because your matchmaking system was difficult to use, or your settings were too many questions before the game starts. All these things that the game developers, at their getting towards the end of their project, will be trying to just get these things out of the way, when they should be their own things to think about, their own problems to like tackle. And you feel like you're getting near the end of that finish line. Things aren't important anymore. You've got the things you care about done. But that's really, I'm coming back around again. That's why it's nice to have people come in at that stage who have their own specializations, because they know they can work quickly, but they don't have to take the time to learn like you would if you wanted to get that done right. And so publishers can elevate an indie studio from like barely working audio but great gameplay to someone that has that great audio because they were able to get somebody who knew how to make it look good without spending extra 2 months getting it working, kind of thing.
When you talk about a publisher in that context, it reminds me of what you guys were saying earlier about how you want to, plug into a community, so that because people that have been in it longer will know this little idiosyncrasy about Unity, and you can ask them for help, or you can ask them for this help about sound design, or you can ask help. But the publisher will do that for you in a much bigger, more structured way than your local video game meetup.
For sure, that's a great way to think about it.
So what sort of credentials and experience does someone need to work for a game developer or publisher? And do those credential requirements change at all if you go from like a small developer to a big developer or a publisher?
I'll tell you as myself, and then I think Zale can follow up on I'll say medium level of what this might look like. I personally do not care what experience you have as far as like a degree. I could give a damn. What I particularly care about are two major factors. A, can you show me you've done stuff? And B, can you show me that you know how to Google? I'll be more honest with you. That is the two factors I care about more than anything. Can you show me you've completed things as a programmer or artist or whatever? And then second, do I need to, right? Can I trust that you'll be able to Google your problems? Do I need to worry about having to hold your hands the entire time I'm working with you? Right? Because honestly, I think your ability to search and Google outweighs almost half of your programming skills, or half of the other skills, as particularly as a programmer, it outweighs half of everything else. Now, kind of handing off that like degree aspect, I pass on to Zale, who dropped out of college, has been working with me since he was 16, and works at Owlchemy Labs. So to even say that the slightly higher next level up, which I guess AAA or lower level AAA, right? Again, progress. Your skill level will show for itself to show that you've completed projects, right? Your degree is really only a show that you can keep up with a thing.
Yeah, for the game industry in general, the consensus I've talked to people who have been on the hiring side of things, the people that have been like, they felt super qualified for a position and didn't get it. It's it's all about how well of a fit you are at that company. Like they talk, I mean, going to school for games is a gamble in of itself because you should always be going for something like software engineering or a general art degree if you're going for it. Don't focus so much on games because then you're stuck with just games, right? But the game industry in general, having a degree is a great way of saying, hey, I have the dedication to put into doing good at games. I were part of these game jams. I did these like school events, but almost every bit of value you can get from college, I think you can get from an alternate source for obviously a lot cheaper. Like at the cost I was working since I was 16, I had a game on Steam the year before then when I first started working on VR stuff. I went through the enormous amount of effort to get a game onto Steam because I was really passionate about it. And then various things driven by passion going forward, they're looking for somebody that cares about what they're doing enough that they're willing to work for it. Be that going through school, be that learning Unity from YouTube and going to game jams. Really, most game studios are looking for people that are passionate about making games in general and have a willingness to learn. Like I said, Google Foo, right? If I ask you a question and you're like, well, I don't know, right? That's like a really bad sign because almost every response should be, huh, I know if I know anything about it, I can say this, but I also know where to go to find out more. I also know that if I look through this old project, like it's actually something really interesting as you get into many years of this, you forget a lot of what you've done in the past, right? Because you're not working with that every day anymore. And so you're like, huh, I actually don't remember, but I wrote code for that before that I can go back and refresh myself on, right? And so it's really about having a lot of resources for yourself, be that something you could share like Google links or just like a huge pile of notes and notepads that you have for yourself. Being able to maintain and gather information that you can then give back to the game or the company or whatever that is. That's what people really value the most. Your ability to help the company, not any metrics or degrees or any specific things that you can be looking for, just a generalized willingness to put in effort. With the AAA studios, they care a bit more because they have a corporate structure to follow, right? They have like, well, how can I justify to my boss if this person fails at their job, right? It's a lot more of a risk if somebody gets a job with a degree, they went to Full Sail or some other game studio, or maybe just a regular college with a game degree or an art degree, whatever, right? Something's showing them that there's no reason that there was every reason this person should have been good at this job. And it's not my fault they didn't, right? Versus where you're going on a limb to some extent to go somebody who doesn't have those degrees and stuff. There's definitely is some aspect of like, I don't want to say elitism, but they put a bar there. They think that's the right place for that bar is getting a degree. And they're not necessarily wrong to some extent because you are going to only get people that met past that bar, which is a bar they want to follow. But you're also cutting off a large amount of people that maybe have their own strengths and their own ability to prove themselves, just not in that specific metric. And it's interesting to see a lot of corporate structures care more about the first one, while indie studios, like Carlos says, I don't care what you do as long as you can get your job done and prove to me that you aren't going to be more of a burden than you are an asset.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll say in my experience, so my position isn't directly involved in game development. I support game development. So when I came in with a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in econometrics. And for me, I would say that what really made the difference in my getting the role wasn't so much my degrees. I think my degrees helped and they were definitely a competitive advantage. But I feel like for me, it was the ability to prove, because my application process had a mini project that I had to go through and complete. And the purpose of that project wasn't necessarily to test my technical ability. It was there to test my ability to process information, to draw conclusions from it, and then to present that information in a way that other people could understand. And so in my position, my position tends to be very in on the data team, our positions tend to be very somewhat customer service oriented, where our customers are game developers. And so what we're doing is our purpose is to provide the developers with insights about their game, or not just developers, but also, for example, if you're a product manager, if you're like if you're launching a mobile title with monetization, right? Our purpose is to give you the information that you need to make better decisions about the game that you're producing. And so in that context, what really matters is your ability to turn information into, you know, something useful that decision makers can act on and activate. And so I don't know, the advice I got, the advice I got from a former boss, she told me once, she said, you know, Christian, it's okay if you it's not okay for you to just say you don't know. But it is okay for you to say I don't know, but I will find out, or I can try to find out. And sometimes, yeah, that is Googling. Sometimes that is just Googling how to replace this text string in this esoteric way, and then looking up what somebody on Stack Overflow did and replacing it.
For sure. And to bounce off of that, like, I don't know, but you know, I'll find out. There's a lot of programmer interviews will have that same methodology of presenting you a question or scenario that sometimes is borderline either improbable or you know, ridiculous, and the intent is to get you to say, hey, I don't know, either A, how can I fix this, or how can I get resources to find this, right? Or for you to, you know, actively, hey, they want to see how you handle not knowing a problem, right? And for sure, that's a huge factor.
Plus, just getting them to admit they don't is really powerful. If you find someone who will never admit they're wrong or admit they don't know something and will just pretend until they either figure it out, or having someone that's very honest about not knowing something is a lot more valuable than somebody that can pretend they know it until they do, because then at least then you know, hey, this person's working on that where I can work on. What do you say? Sorry.
I was gonna say, you don't end up with 10 weeks of half working code.
Yeah, exactly.
Dude, that's almost like if I work with somebody that never admits that they're wrong and always like that, I don't know, that's almost toxic, man. Like,
oh, exactly.
that's
And that's the first factor. You want to rule that person out. You don't theoretically be working with this dude who won't admit they're wrong about a simple thing.
Yeah, I read, oh gosh, I watched this, maybe it was a YouTube video talking about hiring, and basically they had on the y-axis, they had somebody's like technical competence, or like competence in the tasks of the job.
Right.
And on the other axis, they had the person's like social competence. And basically when they mapped it out, they kind of grouped it up into quadrants. And basically the person that had really high competence in the job, but really low social competence, they were like, we're never going to hire this person because they're everyone's going to hate them. We're not going to get along. It's going to be terrible.
I could be a genius level programmer, being able to optimize the code down to, you know, nanoseconds worth of improving everything across the board. But if I'm a jerk and have a superiority complex to everybody on the team, nobody's gonna want to work with me.
Yeah.
And I don't want to hear anybody ever tell me like, well, I'm just that much of a genius. You know, you got to deal with genius. Because I know a friend of ours, Benson, he's probably the best programmer I've ever met in my entire life. And you will never meet a more agreeable and friendly person who is willing to have an open conversation ever. Like that, he is a gem of a human being. And the fact that some people are like, yeah, I'm just too smart to be able to talk to these simple plebeians. I'm like, no, you're just an asshole. It's just you.
The crazy thing about like getting hired too. You know, I've applied for a lot of jobs. I've been laid off. I've been unemployed. You know, all this stuff. And I only ever see my side of the equation when I'm applying for a job and not getting hired, right? But on the hiring side, you know, you have to. There's only so much money to go around. And Zale, you were saying how you have to justify hiring a particular person when, you know, there's another manager in another department that wants to hire somebody else. Well, why should the money go to your person versus this other person? And then you have to think about, you know, and then let's say that you advocate and you get the allowance, right? Like you get the money to hire your person. Well, if that person doesn't pan out, well, you're on the hook for it now. And I feel like that's kind of what incentivizes. You were saying how there's more of there's an incentive at, you know, there's sometimes an incentive to hire someone with degrees versus somebody that doesn't have degrees, because that's kind of like a tangible competent, like, no, see, look, I took a good risk on somebody, you know.
Mm-hmm. Also, we're at my not Alchemy, but the company I was working at before Alchemy. I was actually part of the hiring process a lot of the time because our engineering department was so small. They were like, well, there's like 5 of you, and we're adding somebody to that team. We should probably ask all 5 of you how you feel about it. Um, and so, and it's really weird because you were in that position not so long ago, so you're very like empathetic of how hard it is. Not to mention they're just like you. They're a game developer, right? You've been where they are in a lot of different ways, and it's almost the worst when you can tell somebody isn't right for that position, because especially like you go through an interview process, you give a technical challenge and you feel that person's just not where they need to be. Maybe not, they're not a bad developer, they're just not at the level that team needs someone to be at, right? And there's a very interesting sort of like dirty feeling you feel, or it's very interesting because when you're only on the getting hired process, it's very easy to see it's like a black box of like, oh, they'll do what they'll do, it's very ineffable. But once you've been on both sides of that, it's very much feels like these are people that want to find someone to hire. They want to meet someone that's right. And you don't want to be the person that seems wrong, and you don't want to be the person that seems like you're catering to exactly what they want. And it's very interesting being on both sides of that field, because when you're hiring somebody, it's an uncomfortable amount of power over somebody else's life. There's no way around that. Even if you're not the deciding vote, it's still an uncomfortable amount of power to be able to say, I feel like that person's not a good fit for this company, or I feel like this person should work here. And then also going back to the hiring side of things, it's just really, I think it's just I think part of that game community is part of it. Like you feel like everyone is together in this community and they're trying to like help each other and move everybody forward. Like, hey, I see you're maybe more junior than I am, or you have less experience than I do, and I want to help you learn. But at the same time, you have to think about what this company needs, right? What this company needs as a person. Maybe this company can't afford the 3 or 4 months it'll take to get this person up to speed, or right. It's really sad to see that sometimes, because you want to help this person, and the company is making you put their interests ahead of that person when you are part of that. I think especially when it's a game developer interviewing a game developer, because you're in the same community, you're in the same boat, just on different sides of this one equation. And it's uncomfortable, and it's something that you kind of think about sometimes, especially when you meet somebody who needs a job and you can't give it to them, because that kind of weighs on your conscience, even sometimes, even going forward into your life.
Are you still on the hiring side of things right now, or you don't
Thank
get
God,
into
no,
that?
I'm not part of that
Okay.
anymore. Yeah,
Okay,
Alchemy's
so
too
that
big
was
for all that. Yeah, Alchemy's too big for that now. I meet them after they've been hired and go, welcome aboard. Like it's so great to meet you, and that's a much nicer way to meet somebody on a
okay. So
team and go,
you got to experience it, and you're like, nah, man,
no more, no more of that.
no more.
It's so
Unsubscribe.
uncomfortable meeting somebody after you've given them the job too, because they literally said like, yeah, we're gonna go talk to the developers, see how they feel about you. Come back. They said they like you, and then they come in and they're like, hey, thanks for getting me the job. And we're all like, yeah, welcome aboard.
Yeah, what you said about when you're the job applicant, you have a tendency to see everything as black and white, dude. I relate to that so much because I've definitely seen it black and white. Man, I've definitely seen it black and white many times. Yeah.
I get that for sure.
So do you all believe Texas game dev is becoming kind of like a hub here in the United States?
Texas fluctuates up and down, is my answer. Houston in particular definitely fluctuates. Austin, in its Austenness, is
It
I
has
don't know.
periods of time where it's good for. As a person that lives in Austin, I moved to Austin to become part of that hub, and it's definitely not what it used to be. For one thing, COVID hit the meetup communities in general really hard, especially out here in Austin. There used to be a bunch of very specific game meetups and the general stuff, and it seems like some of them are coming back right now. Some of them are just dead forever. And I feel like what Texas had was very much a community of people that would connect together, especially in Austin, the
Yeah,
companies that worked there. There's a lot of game companies in Austin that know each other, but as a person, there's not really any way. The ladders that got you in the rooms with those people aren't there anymore, or they're much smaller and more infrequent.
yeah. Austin used to have one of the biggest game dev meetups, the biggest in Texas for sure. I don't know about the US. I imagine somewhere in Cali would probably have a bigger one. I imagine LA or San Fran probably have bigger ones.
Mhm.
Uh, But studios wise, I know people like BioWare were up in Austin. At Gearbox, I know you guys are out. Not
Briscoe.
in Frisco. I was gonna say I know it's not a major city. Um, so Houston had 6 Foot Games.
They were half
They,
contractor, half game developer.
yeah, they did Grey Goo and I think one other game. A long time ago, and they left the game dev industry and they started back up. I think a year or so ago, they started doing game dev again, explicitly. There's a lot of industry VR happening in Houston, more than
Yeah,
there is
there's a
like
lot of that.
regular game dev happening. For example, myself, I've done projects with the medical center for simulation VR simulations. I know another company that does military simulations for the government military, right? With jet simulations for training. So it is definitely a there's a lot of stuff happening here. It fluctuates a little bit in what kind of things are happening here. But I definitely think it's growing.
It's kind of weird because they're here, but especially since so much stuff is remote these days, even if the company is in Texas, maybe half the employees aren't in Texas, right? Or and depending on how that company works, but a lot of the time it doesn't feel like the location matters as much anymore, which just sucks because when you want to go, you want someplace to meet these people. Now
COVID
everybody's
definitely changed
scattered.
that.
Everyone's scattered around now, and it doesn't feel like there's any way. The communities only seem to exist in conventions and like meetups now, or the big stuff. GDC, Unite, the other one in Berlin it's still pretty huge. I think they still had like 7,000 people, something crazy this year. It's huge. It takes over a whole city in Germany.
Dude, yeah,
Um,
the COVID thing, the COVID thing happened to get to Gearbox too. I mean, like in person stuff like in person events are slowly coming back,
Yeah.
but yeah, the the workforce is remote now, and I mean, even on my team, more than half the people on my team live outside of Texas. You know.
Oh yeah.
I've actually never been in a non-remote setting, except when I was working with Carlos. Everything else has been remote.
For example, I know Pokemon. They're not a Texas-based. The Pokemon like international. Like the Pokemon that handles not Game Freak, the are the regular Pokemon games, but Pokemon International that handles the card game and like the mobile apps of the card games. They were just now getting back. Like they have a huge office and not used because of COVID. A gorgeous office that they're just not using.
But dude, but I don't know. I mean, I I feel optimistic. I mean, we still have. I mean, we have Gearbox, we have Bethesda, we have id Software. Like we have
Oh yeah,
AAA
Bioware
studio.
too.
Yep, like we have AAA studios in Texas, and we have organizations like like the IGDA Houston IGDA still has a chapter here in Houston. You've got organizations like Aura Fury that are trying to make things happen. So like I feel like the seeds are there.
Oh, for
I feel like
sure.
the seeds are there for sure.
It's
It
just a
does kind of
matter
feel
of
like a
us
white
what's the word? Nurturing those seeds.
Kindling.
There you go.
Yeah.
COVID sort of wiped out everybody, and so I feel like right now things are just starting to come out and rebloom. It's interesting to see how things come back because they're definitely not going to go back to the same shape they were before. Different organizations will be more popular. Different companies will have more like. Cause I think a lot of the big stuff in Austin back in the day was that studios would host open events for the whole industry to come
Hmm.
do stuff with, and so on any given month or quarter, right, these studios would have meetups where everybody would meet and they would use it ostensibly to network and maybe find people to work at the company. But they also add the aspect of like, hey, everybody who's in the industry is in this room right now. We're all here together talking. Maybe if you're not there for id, right? Maybe you meet somebody who works at some indie studio you want to work for, or you meet somebody where you get to meet an indie studio, like, or you get to make an indie studio. It's such an interesting paradox. You either meet someone in college and kind of as a group together, you guys go off and make a studio, or as people who are in the industry, you have to work together to find the time, energy, and just right conditions to make a game studio. And I feel like some of those conditions have been unattainable because of the lack of exposure to each other, to meet each other, and just economy has been so bad, it's hard to justify taking a huge financial risk making a game studio. And if you have a place where you're surviving, you don't really want to mess it up. And or if you're just an indie studio, like Carlos said, like with Shadows Optional, it's so much effort and time into keeping things where they are. It's hard to find that, excess time, that excess money to be able to dedicate to something that might not pay off for years, if not just getting it to the point, or at least half a year at least, to get to a place where you can talk to publishers. Getting that those barriers to entry were always difficult, and it's getting harder and harder to jump that gap. I
Dude,
think
yeah.
but that's not really Texas related though, but it's in general.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm like, I'm a pretty extroverted person, so I just like talking. So I just like talking to people anyway, right? But
Mhm.
um, in general, like I feel like that's what it's like. We touched on it earlier, right? You need people to make a game, and you need people to get a game to market, and you need like and yeah, working remotely, makes it possible for people to find the setup that works for them. But there's a really strong networking, and some people don't like the word networking, so let's just say socializing, right? There's a really strong socializing benefit to going to big events at, like an open event at an id Software or at a Gearbox Software or something like that, and
For sure.
getting to meet other people and just have those little incidental conversations that can spark,
And
something new in the future.
as a person that loves VR, I was really hoping that that would bloom as a way to do stuff like that. But I think unfortunately the technology wasn't there in time for what it needed to be able to fill in that gap again. And so it feels like there's just a huge void where VR is in some ways a better option theoretically, right? Because we don't want to lose the benefits of remote work. Being able to work with somebody in Washington is hugely powerful because people, as working in Houston, the pool of people to work with is very small. Even if it is people who are very passionate about it, it's not a hub for games, or the people that are in it for serious games, not like video games, but working with Exxon, NASA, big companies. They're using the same tools as us, and they have the same skill sets, but their focus is much more on not entertainment and more industry. And so having the wider like pool of people of the entire world, or at least people in a reasonable enough time zone, as someone who's tried to work with somebody in Australia, that is a big important factor, is having a reasonable time zone difference between you and the person you're working with.
Dude, I
But
work with someone in Australia.
it's fun,
Me
but it's
too.
Straight
also a
up,
lot.
yeah.
It's 2 a.m. That's a great meeting time. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
It's interesting you
Horrifying.
bring up VR because that leads us into our next question area, which is improvements in VR gaming. But I know it can also relate to like VR and work. I know personally I was quite happy when Valve did its fingers simulating into the VR environment.
The index controllers.
Yeah, I love
I love
those.
it. I love the index controllers.
Um,
Mhm.
And it's interesting seeing, I guess Meta 3's got the whole AR thing going on, and some other people are trying to do some stuff with that. But yeah, here's some speculation on where we think we're going. And
I got a little show and tell if anybody wants to pause that for a second. This is a first version Knuckles prototype controller.
oh, huh,
Yeah, I don't know if anybody knows what the real controller looks like, but there's this
I've got it right
huge
here.
touchpad. Yeah, let's do a comparison real quick. Because
Did you say Knuckles?
oh, sorry, that's definitely not what they're called anymore. The index controllers were called the Knuckles controllers for a long time.
Oh yeah, they
But
were called Knuckles.
yeah, and this is back when they were
Okay.
called Knuckles. They say Knuckles in this box somewhere. But yeah, that's one of my favorite parts of
Huh.
working in the VR industry is how quickly the technology will change. And if you are in the industry at the right time, you can get access to these like middle child kind of devices that never got sent to the public, but are
Mhm.
super cool. Like if you look on the edge here, you can see the exposed tracking sensors and
Oh,
stuff. It's one of my
yeah.
favorite parts about the job is getting to see technology again behind that curtain where as you're a gamer, they're only ever going to show you stuff once it's ready. But in the VR industry, especially, some stuff doesn't work until about a week before they release it. So if they want your game to use their technology, they're going to have to give you the janky stuff so it's ready to go when it actually does work well. Like I worked with the pass-through system way earlier than it was released, and it was not great. I don't know how much I can say about it. So it definitely, Facebook doesn't always get their stuff right first attempt. And it gets there eventually, but as a developer, that awkward stage is stressful, but also really fun because you feel like you're getting to be a part of the birth of something that will move on in the world. Like pass through is going to be a thing for the rest of technology, right? VR pass through is a concept that will exist until AR has completely won. And as a person who is there at the right time, at the right place, you get to experience a part of history.
Do you have any you're talking about how that's like an intermediate product. Do you have any fun janky bug stories?
Oh man. For the index controller, no. Valve is very good at their technology. Valve is one of those people that doesn't really do stuff like that. There was all just hardware iteration, but
no, we with the man, what's the name of that headset? The Valve headset.
Vive?
With the Vive. We had
the Vive is
so I mean we have a bit more of a stories about like
but it's the HTC Vive.
Yeah, the HTC Vive.
Yeah.
Right? This is the first like headset they had. And
they weren't willing to stamp their name on the front of it until after they'd iterated with another company.
There we go.
Right. So we were lugging this thing around, right? So for those of you that don't know, the HTC Vive consists of having 2 cameras you have to mount in the corners of the room. The cable that comes out of the back of your head that ties into a little box. The little box connects to the computer, and then you have, I think, you had like another little box that came out, and that box connected to like the controllers. So we lugged all this stuff around to demo VR technology to people everywhere, right? Like to one of our first things we demoed was to old people with the intent of, hey, could VR be used for stuff in old people homes?
That was fun. It was fun to talk to them about it too, because some of them were really into it and some of them did not understand it at all. It was...
But I mean, there's things where like, because we had to like connect and set up the headset so many times. We had cases where so the process is something like you connect to the headset, the computer tells you it's connected, then you click one hand, all right, cool, left hand, click right hand. And then sometimes you'd get something funky where you're wearing the headset and it suddenly thinks that the right controller is your head. And the camera was here, and now the camera is here, and you're like, what's going on? I'm so sick.
But that's not even the worst of it, because your brain will instinctually move your hands to your head. And so, especially like with VR, there's no disconnect, right? So you move your head and you really just go, because your brain is trying to correct for all the weird motion it's seeing.
So basically, you took this to a nursing home and you put it on their heads, and then the camera.
Some old dude, yeah, for sure. His head was now on his hand. I very quickly had to like dive to try and take this off his head before he threw up or something. Because I was about to have the old guy like trip and fall on me. I wasn't about to be blamed for that.
That's a recipe. That reminds me of those. Did you guys ever see those YouTube videos of the roller coaster VR demos at the mall where people will put them on and they would lean forward and just face plant because they thought they were. Oh man, spectacular. Okay, well I'm glad there were no injuries.
Oh, we've seen injuries.
We had someone break their arm.
There you go. Zale, go for it.
Are you serious?
This is a great story. This is a game called Richie's Plank Experience, which someone thought was a great idea. Gorgeous. It's a great idea for a game. Someone said it was a great idea for people's first time in VR, which was not a good idea. Because what you do is you go to the top of an elevator to like the top of a skyrise. And instead of there being a building out there, there's just a wooden plank going off like a diving board off the side of this building. And as one of the greatest things to show you how powerful the thing I was talking about earlier about your brain only trusting your vision, you're going to stand on that piece of wood and you're going to be like, I can step off this wood. There's ground right there. And then you try to, and your brain's like, what are you doing? We're going to die. Don't do that. And so
you get stories.
It's literally, you look down and you see cars down there moving before the distance looks right. That's one of the most powerful things. Like you get viscerally scared. We also had a thing where we do sometimes where you can actually line up an actual piece of wood. And so you're actually standing on a piece of wood. And so instead of like the ground being next to you, it actually is a little bit further down and you can't make yourself push to go further down, touch the ground. the game was great.
Dude.
People will get
Yeah.
very visceral reactions out of that game.
So-
But one person had a very visceral reaction. They're like, "I'm jumping," and it's like, "Okay, walk off." And they said, "No, I'm jumping," and then they jumped forward and then slammed themselves and their arm into the wall. And I think either they broke their wrist or their ankle doing it.
Oh my
Jeez.
gosh.
Wow.
And they just fully committed to jumping off the side of this building, and they didn't realize they were a
In the
foot
living
or
room?
two, and 2 feet from a wall. I mean,
That's-
full force. Like, I'm gonna jump to the next building over amount. Like, I don't know how far I'm gonna get.
They thought they were
Yeah.
Supermaning off that building.
Yeah, and
Dude,
it was bad. And
Dude, I'm looking at the page for this game right now, and it says comfort level intense. And then it says that it also has an optional nightmare mode.
Oh yeah, there's
oh
my
yeah,
God.
even they have spiders crawling out the plank to push you out of the elevator and stuff like that,
Oh
just
my
to make
God.
it extra scary. Just
Jeez.
It's crazy how much immersion you get from that plank just being on the floor, because you're stepping on it and the plank is rickety, and it adds that extra.
if you go the
to
extra
that,
mile, yeah, it goes really, because you have to keep
yeah.
your balance then instead of just like standing on the
Yeah.
ground. But yeah,
Dude,
Funnily
you know-
enough, Jacob's wife had a fun experience in that game.
Yeah, she tried it out for the first time at the Galveston Esports Convention that we were one of the vendors at, and yeah, the guy that ran it pushed her off the plank while she's on there.
pushed her off of it.
Yeah,
That's
there's a
horrible.
YouTube video on our channel you can watch of it happening.
That's fun.
You know what's really crazy about this conversation though is that if you released Richie's plank, if you released Richie's plank experience as just a normal Xbox game or a normal Steam game, it would be trash.
Oh, for
But-
sure.
But as a VR game, you just put this plank on the ground, and it's awesome.
And
But
then
in
the
order-
game is a 5-minute experience. It's game open, buildings around you, elevator, go in.
Yeah. And in order to design something that captivating and like just on a monitor on a 2D screen, you have to do way more.
Oh yeah, no, and there's nothing quite as like visceral as the moment you step off the plank and you feel that like acceleration of speed as you're about to like hit the floor. Your chest, your stomach goes right up your throat.
Oh,
your inner ear doesn't change, but the visual moving makes your brain feel the inertia and all the movement of going down. You feel it. It's like you feel the roller coaster in your pit of your stomach thing happen. You do not move. It's such a powerful thing. I think it's a lot of when VR first started getting popular, everyone's like, these games aren't fun. They're just tech demos. I'm like, yeah, but they're really visceral, powerful ones. Like, you can't have, Call of Duty without Doom, right? To make the first concept, because Doom as a game is still pretty fun, but it's compared to dialogue and characters and mission levels and like loadouts and all these different things that come later to make a game feel like it's enough. There had to be some games that come first that by modern standards are terrible indie games, but the amount of effort put into them and the period of time they were in was a huge amount of effort and a huge success because of that amount of personal growth each player has to go through before they can get, because now my tastes in VR games, I want those longer games. I've played enough tech demos over the years that I want something that feels like a very full visceral game, but that's a question of what does that even look like, because no one's really done it that well yet. Some people have tried with varying levels of success.
And
right?
for sure, and then that's something we're moving towards. As the technology is getting better, one of the things that we kind of early on as developers is we take into account that the average playtime for a user in VR is somewhere between 20 and 40 minutes on average. That's roughly how long a person on average is going to play any type of VR headset, right? Whether I'm playing on the Quest or on the Vive. Between the factors of weight, eye strain, and a couple other things,
and just standing that long usually.
Yeah, that as well as standing that long, those factors all kind of tie in together into how long a player is going to stay there. And then if you look at a game that's longer, I think one of the longer games in VR are going to be Half-Life Alyx. It arguably one of the, if not the most famous VR game at this point. And it's probably one of the longer ones too. The levels are designed in almost that same methodology of looking at 20 to 40 minute sections that the player gets to consume as they as they run around the game. So hopefully as we as we build more games, have a better understanding of it. Both the design, kind of how Half-Life Alex does these 45-minute chapters. Hopefully, that will be better understood. We'll get to see more of that taken in a form that makes it easy to consume longer VR games.
Also, the headsets will get more comfortable, and the people will discover naturally the ways they want to play VR games. Eventually, it's like a chicken and the egg, as well as like a iterative process where it's like, well, this game was more fun than that game, so games are going to start doing more what that game did. Locomotion has been a huge challenge from day one because you can't move people that are motion sick, but there are people that don't get motion sick that prefer it, right? And so there's these like big challenges across the whole industry of deciding how these games get decided. And the problem is the industry is still so small. There's no room for niches. You can't have Dark Souls in VR because Dark Souls needs a huge number of people that wouldn't play it to be able to. I mean, if you think of the whole game industry, maybe 5% of people play Dark Souls optimistically, right? If you count mobile games, it's probably even less than that. But they have a huge number of people, enough to support an entire studio. But that's because everyone who wants to play video games has an Xbox or a PlayStation or a PC and a way to play it. And VR headsets are just starting to enter that phase of like enough people have VR headsets that being a game studio makes sense. And I mean, we're very tied to one headset right now, right? The Quest is the only platform with real growth and the real numbers there to have a functioning ecosystem, a functioning like studios worth of game studios, a number of people to buy the game. And a lot of game studios between then have either had to just be insane successes like Beat Saber. Beat Saber made money at a time where nobody else was, because if you think basically everyone who had a headset had Beat Saber, and that was getting them the numbers they needed. But I'll tell you what, Beat Saber probably could have gone out of business if they weren't bought up by Facebook. That's who's been supporting them this whole time, because the people who bought Beat Saber bought it, and people keep buying it, sure, but it's a game that is very sort of ubiquitous across the industry. And at a certain point, it won't be as popular because the people that the creators and influencers that were making it very popular at the time, the people making content about Beat Saber that make people want to play it, that dies off over time, right? And so they benefited from this protection of Facebook to some extent. I don't want to call them out. I don't want to say anything bad against them. The game is very fun. They did a huge amount of effort to get like multiplayer working because they knew what their people, like their customers wanted. They wanted to make their game right, but they were existing at a time where making that game work was very difficult, and they would have had to be very stringent and very limited in what they could have done without the benefits of a larger company to help them get partnerships with these big studio names that would help them get into bigger mass audience appeal and keep that growth cycle going. The VR industry as a whole is starting to mature and starting to get there. Like the Quest is a lot of people have the Quest now. It's a real thing. Like the Vive or the Index. You talk to a random person on the street, they probably have no idea what it is, but someone has seen their nephew or their friend have a Quest, right? Someone has seen somebody have a Quest, even if you just see it at Best Buy, right? It's in the world now. And so we're getting to a place where people can start targeting that audience with more likelihood of being able to support themselves. And that's we've been there for a few years now, and games take years to make. And so these processes seem like they're not moving, but that's because once you have the people to make games, they have to make them. And once they come out, then that process starts of like continually growing as an industry. Like, oh, this game did this, we can add that in mid process to our game. And like they're like Half-Life Alyx's distance grab is a great example of that. Before Half-Life Alyx, you had to walk over to something and pick it up if you wanted it for the most part. And now most games that have picking up items have distance grabbing now, because it was something that they taught everyone else in the industry felt great, was one of those baseline things that always works for people. And it feels good. It's one of those, like, pinch to zoom for phones. Maybe it's not the most intrinsically like you don't look at a phone before phones and then go, oh, I could pinch to make things zoom in. But once someone says it to you, you're like, oh, that makes total sense and that works great. And that makes the phone way easier to use, right? No one thinks, oh, I could invisibly draw a line between me and this object and pull it towards me, but it makes sense. They've seen Spider-Man, they've seen telekinesis and stuff, and it can make sense to them. And I think it's one of those, we're slowly getting more and more of those like building blocks of what makes VR great without having to fight around making it happen at all. Like, how do you make grabbing work? Before Job Simulator, that was highly contested how grabbing should work. And once they had that definitive answer for what people liked, we could move forward. And the industry is getting more and more of those.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed seeing other VR games using the same, like the flick grab system that you get from Half-Life Alyx. Because, I mean, if somebody told me that I was going to enjoy picking things up in a VR game, I'd have called them a liar. But there is something really satisfying about flicking and catching the thing that you're trying to get.
It gives you almost this like semi Jedi feel, right? Like, come to me. Wah!
Yeah.
It's funny because the Jedi games or the Star Wars like Vader ones when they first came out had an attempt at something like that, and it didn't feel good, right? And then Half-Life Alyx came out and they improved their design on that a little bit, and it made it more fun. Like people had, even like Carlos said, Jedi, that's a perfect use case for that concept. But without that concept being there, they were going about it in a way that didn't have the satisfying funness of the flick grabbing that was required. The concept was there, but they didn't understand that building block, that fundamental concept of the flick, the pull, the imaginary line that you can reliably like visualize instead of like aim, click, wait kind of thing, right? It was very, it worked. It made sense. It even made more sense as a Jedi theoretically to do it that way. But it wasn't about what's best for being a Jedi. It's about what's best for the gamer, the player, to enjoy the experience.
Yeah. So, sort of branching off from that a bit, from the development perspective, what sort of skills do you really need that are different from normal game development to work in the VR space?
Let's see. I mean, the first one is a decent pair of sea legs. Because you're gonna get dizzy at some point. At some point, you're gonna stick your head on your hand, or you're gonna stick your head on a foot, and you're gonna get real sick. So that's the first step. Make sure you don't get sick.
Or you're setting up a locomotion system and you forget you added an extra 0, and so you go to move an inch and you're like 30 feet away, or you mess up which direction you're moving in, and so you go forward and you just go straight up in the air. That one really got me because I was expecting something and then just whoa.
Right, because it's one thing for your brain to not expect a movement and then get movement. It's another thing for your brain to expect a kind of movement and get a drastically different kind of movement. Right.
Another one is the ability to visualize is really important too, in terms of a skill, because it's a space, right? Unless you want to spend all of your time in the headset, you have to be able to visualize the space around you, the scale, getting a feeling of how big something should be, and just understanding that you're not making a game of sorts, you're making a location almost. It's almost like interior design more than level design.
Yeah, you definitely got to take time to consider how the world around you and why you're building this VR simulation. Because oftentimes you'll look at a game and as a VR developer, and you'll look at why was this game developed? This game could have there's nothing special about this game that makes it worth making as a VR game versus this game having been what we may call sometimes a flat game, your regular 3D, 2D game, right? So it's a factor of considering how those interactions make your VR game. So that's something definitely to I don't know if it's a skill you necessarily build or more of a thing you kind of start to pick up on as you play a certain amount of VR games. So that's definitely a factor, right? Understanding how usability and how the players are going to interact with the world around them. Any other specific skills, Zale, you could particularly aim at? Beyond that, it's being generally a developer.
I mean, it's very similar. It's a willingness to accept that there aren't good answers to things to base stuff off of. When you're making a regular pancake or flat game, You have a lot of resources to take from, like from the past 40, 50 years of like references of what things should be done, how things can be done, and relatively small amount of time of like 5 or 6 years you could base stuff off of. Now there's going to be a lot more sort of moving around in the dark and sort of having to make a decisions that you can't really back up as well as you'd like to be able to with like examples, because you have to sort of just go, well, something needs to happen here, and it's up to us to figure out what feels best, because there may not be somebody else who's ever done something like this even, or maybe at least very least being willing to accept that sometimes something isn't the right choice. Like I know there was an example of, I can't think of exactly what it was, but there was a VR design strategy that people liked using early on, which I think was like the roller coaster type of like sitting in a car moving forward interaction that people never actually felt good. People just were used to using it, and then
the on rails,
Yeah.
thought process of game design. Yeah,
because they thought, well, you can't move them naturally, so how do you? Maybe just on rails feels better, right? And there is something called the cockpit effect, which is really cool, where you won't get motion sick if you feel like you're inside of a vehicle moving, not yourself moving. I think that's partially because people are so used to feeling feeling of being driven in a car without the feeling of accelerating, because you're sort of sitting at 60 for 2 hours or whatever to go someplace. It helps
so yeah,
your
research
brain
for
be able
sure.
yeah. And then, but this is a good example of sometimes what everyone else is doing isn't the right thing to be doing. And so being willing to think about what's being learned, what the technology's changed, like hand tracking is going to add a huge amount of like variations in how the games can be played in VR design in general, because it's very different than working with controllers in a lot of ways, and a lot of like remaking the wheel to get back to where we were in the first place, even, right? Because
Yeah, so part of what it's kind of piggyback off that you're mentioning how controllers versus hands, right?
Mhm.
And the same thing I mentioned about interaction with the world. You got to, as a VR designer, you got to be able to understand how players are going to interact with your objects in the world, because they are going to be reaching out to touch them, right? It's not like in Resident Evil. I look at the plant on the wall and I know I can look at it and understand that, it should be able to instantly see the little E to interact around it, right? So you definitely got to be able to understand how physical your players are going to be with your game, right? Understand that if you put an object over there, how are they going to reach it? Are you using the flick that we talked about earlier, or are they physically reaching up? These are a whole bunch of factors that kind of tie into how you design your VR systems. And whether or not I can specifically say what skill those things kind of are, I think comes to playing enough VR games that you kind of get a feel for what things feel good, and you make some of those decisions for yourself.
Yeah, it's an important part of like, you may have been playing games your entire life and feel like you understand how games should be made so well, but there's so many new VR games that change, that give you such great perspective, as well as new games that come out every year that have a little like that iterative step forward, that little bit of insight to help keep the industry forward. You have to be paying attention, because you don't want to make a VR game that would have been great 2 years ago. You want to make a VR game that's great when it's released. And the industry moves so quickly, you have to pay attention to make sure that the players that you're designing a game for will even exist when you're done. Because I remember, like, people were designing for PC VR. They were starting to get comfortable working with PC VR. And then the Quest came out. And that was a huge change, because you went from being like, yeah, you're a PC, you have performance to spare, like just make it work, like quick and dirty, make it work, to like every draw call counts, every vertice matters, you can't overdo it, especially the Quest 1. The Quest 1, I basically had a scene with a bunch of cubes in it, and it ran at like 70%, like 40 frames a second. Like it was very easy to mess it up, even just in the settings of your project. Like all these new big changes that came in, and it just shook up the whole industry, because now the Quest is the only place we'll start with. But there are a bunch of people that had started making PC games that had to probably completely start over, because let's say you have all these art assets. There are cases of games on the PC world where you couldn't have had two of like these assets in a quest that worked, and they had dozens of them across their game. It's it's a big industry shift that if you aren't paying attention to, the customers might be gone by the time you get there. because the lead times on games is unarguably long. Even if you only get it down to a year and a half, right? Only a year and a half to make a game. That's still a huge amount of time. And in the industry where Facebook might release a new headset, this year, like the Quest 3, huge performance improvement on the Quest 3. A lot of new games are going to be a lot prettier on the Quest 3 because they have that extra that newer Snapdragon, the more performance. And it's you got to pay attention. The industry keeps changing quickly. It's not like you got to wait 6 years for the next Xbox to come out to worry about, right? Or the PCs where it's like you can assume everybody can do at a certain minimum level, and from there you're good. It's the Quest is a very specific headset, very specific requirements, and a company that isn't great about maintaining reliability over time as well, which is kind of annoying. Facebook is, or I keep calling it Facebook. Meta keeps they've been fun to interact with the past few years for sure. We were part of the Launchpad program once or twice, and yeah, it's an interesting place for sure.
So yeah, to keep it short, keep up with the industry, play VR games. Beyond that, be a developer.
Yeah, if you feel like your game idea is fun enough, it's probably it. It might be if it's something unique, something nobody's tried before. I think that's one of the coolest things about VR. If you have a fun idea that doesn't seem like anybody else has thought of, someone literally might have never have thought of that idea ever. And if you're the person to make it, there you go. Like there's this really good story about this guy that made Cubism, which is effectively 3D Tetris kind of thing. It's like a puzzling Tetris. It's not quite Tetris because you don't continuously play and it doesn't have like rows going out, but it has blocks and fitting them together into a specified space. And I remember he created his game for during the Quest 1. Like I remember I met him when the Quest 1 came out, I think, or maybe when the Quest 2 came out. One of those many years ago now, where it was very early on in the Quest days, before pass through, before any of that stuff. And he made this game, and it was a good idea. And then the industry changed, and his good idea became a great idea because now with pass through, you can use it. There is a game on the Quest now where you can passively play while still feeling comfortably able to see the world around you, and the game doesn't take so much of your energy and so much of your awareness that you can't still be present in the real world. Like I've sat there and talked to people while playing Cubism before because I can see them, I know where they are. Like I still feel like I'm in my world right now, but I can also be in the midair. I mean, as the person watching somebody do that, it's not quite as comfortable. But as the person in the headset, it feels very natural. It's like, oh yeah, I'm playing a phone game while talking to this person, but I'm not staring at my phone. I can look at them and then just glance over here and kind of thing. Or you put it right in front of their face, and so you're just in their face doing that.
So you need the next iteration where both people have the headset and the headset's doing some logic to remove the hands moving around. So both of you feel like you're having a normal conversation, but you're both, just kind of like doing whatever with your hands.
But yeah, that's one of the coolest things that is going to be coming in the future is shared AR experiences are really powerful. The ability to both be looking at the same thing in the real world, but it's all digital is really cool. Especially I've seen ideas for like Apple's idea for like AR FaceTime is also really cool, where it's like they're just standing in your living room talking to you kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's a really exciting next few couple years to a decade to see what happens.
Definitely. Yeah.
Well, thank you. That was a lot of great information. I want to give you all a quick chance to share where people can find you, if there's any socials you want to share, if there's a website that you want to send people to, whatever you want. Here's your chance to shout it out.
Yeah. You guys can find Shadows Optional on Reddit and Instagram at Shadows Optional. Our website is shadowoptionals.com. As well as you can find me with the Game Dev Houston community with the gamedevhouston.com. Let me double check the website before I finish going. Game Dev Houston. Yes, gamedevhouston.com. If you guys want to join the Houston Game Dev community, there's plenty of us out here. We do monthly meetups, game dev show and tells, help each other out, all that good stuff.
For me, just reach out to Shadows Optional. I'm also in that sphere, and yeah, I unfortunately not too much going on for me personally to work on with, but yeah, I've definitely in the same spheres as Carlos, and reach out to him or reach out to me through there. Will be great to see anybody, talk to people.
Owlchemylabs.com.
They're fine.
There you go.
I like how you say they're fine, not we're fine.
I mean, it's interesting. I don't want to derail anybody, but being at a big company is very different than being at an indie studio because you definitely feel like you're part of a community, but you don't feel the ownership over it that you would deal for like an indie studio with even just 6 people. You still feel like you have that ownership.
Right. Okay, well, I guess it's my go. So you can find me on LinkedIn. My specific tag is Christian-Torres-Lopez, the little specific custom part of the URL. Also, we're looking, Gearbox Publishing is looking for playtesters. So if you go to gearboxpublishing.com/playtest, you can sign up with us to be invited to playtests in the future. And yeah, also Game Dev Houston, the demos they have every month, I think are a really good community building tool that I recommend people check out.
Nice. And for anybody who had trouble hearing the URLs and mapping them into actual text on their browsers, don't worry, we'll also put it in the description. So I've really enjoyed, really enjoyed talking to all of you and learned quite a bit here.
Thank you.
We only got through
Yeah,
we
this
only
was a
got
lot of
through about
fun.
half of our questions, but hopefully there'll be another one in the near future because I've just found it really fascinating.
I'm glad to. I know all of us can ramble on if you leave us too long.
Yeah.
No, yeah. If you guys wanna, I'll actually I'll actually drop my LinkedIn handle here in the chat if you guys connect with me on LinkedIn.
Yeah, for sure.
That'd be
Yeah,
super
for
dope.
sure.
Will do. Well, that's it for this episode, folks. So stay tuned for we'll probably see these folks again since we got some more questions to go for. And plus, we want to hear more about those great stories that they've had to share. So thank you all so much for joining us today. This was a great one. I learned a lot. Alex was saying how much he loved it too, and I'm sure all the viewers are going to be the same thing on that. So thank you so much. You all have a great one.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
you too. Have a good night, everybody.
Pleasure.
Have a good one.